Hi, I'm Selene, and at my father's company grand opening, my name tag didn't just carry my name, it branded me as the family's burden. I stood there, surrounded by clinking champagne flutes and carefully practiced smiles, while my own family made me the center of their amusement. But that moment was only the beginning, because behind the wealth and prestige, behind the Morrow name, lived secrets, the kind that erased my mother, the kind that stripped everything from me. And when I finally uncovered the truth, they didn't just try to quiet me, they tried to ruin me completely. But here's the thing about people who believe they can control you forever: they never expect you to fight back. I never wanted to come. When the invitation arrived, heavy paper, gilded edges, embossed lettering, a showy display of Morrow influence, I almost threw it away without a second thought. But then Isolde called. "Just come, Selene," she had insisted. "Let them see you're still standing." So I came, and now I stood outside Morrow Industries' new headquarters, staring up at the towering glass building, reflecting the lights of Chicago, like a monument to power and privilege. My family's empire, a kingdom built on control, on image, on a legacy that had never truly included me. I let out a slow breath, adjusting the black dress I had chosen, not too bold, not too quiet, something balanced between resistance and restraint. If I was going to walk into their world again, I would do it on my own terms. The moment I stepped inside, I was swallowed by excess. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow across the room. The scent of expensive cologne and champagne hung thick in the air. Voices blended into a constant hum, deals being discussed, alliances forming, power moves hidden beneath polite conversation. This was the Morrow way, and there he was, Magnus Morrow, my father, surrounded by Chicago's elite, laughing easily at something an investor had said, his presence commanding, yet distant, as always. He hadn't looked at me yet, or maybe he had and simply chose not to acknowledge me. Across the room, Vesper stood beside Selene, the two of them flawless, poised, untouchable. They were already watching me, their expressions unreadable, but their amusement unmistakable. I understood then. This wasn't a welcome, it was a performance, and I was the entertainment. I lifted my chin and walked forward. I had only made it halfway across the ballroom when something caught my eye. A small, elegant table placed near the entrance, neatly lined with name tags for arriving guests. One of Vesper's favorite tactics. She liked to call it networking. I knew better. It was control. I skimmed all of the names without much thought. Magnus Morrow, CEO. Vesper Morrow, Morrow Charitable Foundation. Lucian Morrow, future successor. Selene Morrow, social icon. Then I found mine. Selene Morrow, the family's burden. My breath hitched, my fingers tightening before I could stop myself. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of mistake, some tasteless joke. But then I heard it. Selene's laugh. I turned and saw her standing there, holding a glass of champagne, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Oh, come on, Soleil," she said lazily, lifting her glass. "Don't tell me you're actually offended over something so small." Vesper stood beside her, calm and composed as always, her voice smooth and controlled. "These events are meant to be enjoyable, dear. Don't make everything so personal." Heat rose in my chest, but I forced it down. Not here, not in front of them. I glanced around and noticed a few guests had caught on, their eyes flicking toward me quickly, then away. No one said anything. No one stepped in, because this was how it always worked. A quiet humiliation, subtle enough that any reaction from me would make me look like the problem. I should have expected it. I took a slow breath, letting my fingers relax around the edge of the name tag. My pulse echoed in my ears, but I kept my face still, unreadable. If they were waiting for a reaction, they weren't getting one. I adjusted the tag carefully, aligning it with the rest like it belonged here. Then I reached for a glass of champagne from a passing server, turned toward the crowd and smiled. If they wanted a performance, I would give them one. The noise of the room surrounded me, but my thoughts were elsewhere, fixed on that label, on Selene's smirk, and on memories I had spent years trying to bury. I moved through the crowd like I wasn't really part of it, smiling when required, nodding when spoken to, exchanging empty pleasantries. It was all an act, every second of it. This place was a stage, and I refused to play the role they had already written for me. Eventually, I needed space. I made my way toward the back, stepping out on the balcony, letting the cool night air brush against my skin. I should have left the moment I saw that name tag, but something kept me there,
something deeper than pride or stubbornness. Then I heard it. "Funny how your mother just vanished like that." I froze. The voice came from behind me, a man speaking casually as he stood with a small group of investors near the bar, swirling a glass of whiskey, as if the words meant nothing, but they struck me hard. Magnus let out a soft laugh, his tone measured. "People take different paths in life."
The investors smirked. "Yeah, but some disappear more completely than others." Magnus's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes, something sharp. The conversation moved on. Laughter filled the space, but I barely registered it. My pulse quickened, my thoughts racing. Had my mother really left? Or had she been forced out? Was everything I had believed wrong? I scanned the room and spotted Isolde. She wasn't watching the investors. She was watching Magnus and Vesper. And there was something in her expression, something heavy, something knowing. The weight in my chest grew stronger. I needed answers. Slipping away from the crowd, I moved down the hallway toward the offices. I knew this building well, or at least I used to, before I became an inconvenience. Morrow Industries had once been meant for me too. Magnus's office door was slightly open, which was unusual. He never left anything unsecured. Something pulled me forward. I stepped inside. The scent of leather and aged scotch filled the air. Shelves lined with books surrounded a large mahogany desk that dominated the room. Everything was arranged perfectly. Everything except one drawer left slightly open. I paused for a second, then reached out and pulled it open. Inside were neatly stacked documents, but what caught my attention wasn't the reports. It was an envelope tucked between them, worn edges slightly yellowed with time, my name written across the front in handwriting I recognized instantly, my mother's. My throat tightened as I pulled it free, my hands trembling as I opened it. "Celine, I tried to reach you, but they never let me. I hope one day you find this." The words blurred as my vision filled, but I forced myself to keep reading. She wrote about the divorce, about how Magnus and Vesper controlled everything, even her ability to see me, how they twisted the story so completely that once she was gone, she would never be able to come back, how she had never chosen to leave me behind. My breathing turned uneven, sharp and shallow. All those years I believed she had abandoned me, that she had walked away without looking back. It had all been a lie. A shadow fell across the room. I turned quickly, my heart racing, and saw Isolde standing in the doorway. Her eyes moved to the letter in my hand, and something softened in her expression. "You found it," she said quietly. The walls felt like they were closing in around me. "You knew?" I asked. She hesitated. "Not everything, but I suspected enough." My stomach twisted with anger and grief and betrayal, all colliding at once. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice barely steady. Isolde stepped closer, her tone low. "Because you weren't ready to hear it, and because if you lose control now, they win. You understand?" I clenched my jaw. I did understand, even if I didn't want to. I folded the letter carefully, slipping it into my clutch. This wasn't over, not even close. I straightened my dress, lifted my chin, and walked back into the ballroom. But everything looked different now. Every smile, every laugh, every interaction felt hollow. A mask hiding years of deception. The sound of glasses clinking stood around me, but all I could hear were my mother's words repeating in my mind. "They never let me reach you." I stood still in the middle of the room, gripping my clutch tightly, forcing my breathing to stay steady. Around me, the celebration continued, untouched by the storm inside me. Laughter, conversations, flashes of cameras. It all felt staged, like a performance. I had spent years wondering why my mother disappeared, why I had been left behind. Now I knew, and Magnus Morrow stood only a few steps away, completely at ease, soaking in admiration, as if he hadn't orchestrated the greatest betrayal of my life. Then he lifted his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice commanding attention. "Tonight we celebrate not only a milestone for Morrow Industries, but the legacy we continue to build for the future." The crowd quieted, anticipation spreading quickly. I felt my pulse rise. I knew that tone. I knew what was coming. "Strength, innovation, and leadership," Magnus continued, "are the pillars of our success, and tonight I am proud to announce that Lucian Morrow will be my successor, and the future of this company will rest with him alone." Applause erupted, loud and overwhelming. My stomach dropped. Vesper's gaze found mine, her lips curling into a satisfied smile. Celine leaned toward someone nearby, whispering something with barely concealed amusement. They had been waiting for this moment. Magnus didn't even glance in my direction, not once. I was erased, publicly, completely, permanently. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe slowly. I had always known there was no real place for me in this family, but hearing it declared so openly in front of everyone made it cut deeper, made the rejection heavier. But I refused to break, not here. I reached for a glass from a passing server and took a sip, barely tasting the champagne.
My hands were steady, my expression unreadable. If they wanted me humiliated, they would be disappointed. I turned and walked out. I wasn't thinking about where I was going, only that I needed to be away from the flashing lights, the whispers, the suffocating presence of Magnus and Vesper. My feet led me down the hallway, past the event staff, until I found myself in familiar territory. Magnus's office. I hesitated. Then I saw it. The drawer. The one I had left slightly ajar when I found my mother's letter.
A rush of something instinct, desperation pushed me forward. If Magnus had hidden that letter, what else had he kept read? I pulled the drawer open, rummaging through the neatly arranged files, financial statements, board meeting minutes, stock reports, until my fingers brushed against something that didn't belong. A separate folder labeled Charitable Allocations, V. Moreau. I flipped it open, and what I found nearly made me gasp. Numbers, transfers, accounts. It took me seconds to realize what I was looking at. Undeniable proof that Moreau Industry had been laundering money through Vora's so-called charity foundation. My entire body went cold. "Whatever you think you found," a voice drawled from the doorway, "it won't matter." I turned sharply, my heart pounding. Lucian leaned against the doorframe, his expression amused, but there was something in his eyes, a warning. I clutched the folder tighter. "Then you won't mind if I take a closer look, will you?" His smirk didn't waver. "Careful, San. You might not like what you find." I held his gaze, refusing to let him see any hint of doubt. "Nee, will you?" His jaw tightened for the briefest moment before he pushed off the doorframe. "You've already lost. You just don't know it yet." I exhaled slowly as he walked away. I didn't believe him. Not anymore. For years, I had been the outsider in this family, the inconvenience, the burden. But as I stared down at the incriminating documents in my hands, I realized something. I wasn't just a burden anymore. I was a threat. I inhaled sharply, glancing at Isolde. If they were willing to lie to me about my own mother, how far would they go to protect their empire? The answer came the next morning. I woke up to my phone vibrating incessantly on my nightstand. The sharp, relentless buzz filled the silence of my apartment. My stomach twisted as I reached for it, already knowing they had made their move. The first thing I saw was my name, everywhere. Moreau AIS, spirals. A jealous daughter's attempt to sabotage her father's success. Entitled and bitter, Sen Moreau tries to stir family drama at gala. A distorted, carefully edited video clip from the event was attached to most of the articles. It showed me at the name tag table, gripping the humiliating label, my jaw tight. Then a selective cut of me walking away from Magnus's speech, a moment that now looked like a petulant act of defiance rather than self-preservation. I scrolled further, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then I saw her, Vesper, elegantly poised in a pre-recorded interview, her voice coated with false sympathy. "We only ever wanted the best for Sen, but she refuses to be part of this family. This has been difficult for all of us." My stomach twisted as the video cut to Selena, shaking her head in feigned disappointment. "We tried, we really did." And then Lucian, looking effortlessly composed. "It's sad to see someone spiral like this, but some people just don't know how to move forward." I clenched my jaw so tightly it ached. They hadn't just disowned me, they were rewriting the story, and people were eating it up. The first call I answered was from Isolde, Senin. She said, her voice clipped, "Turn on the TV." I had already seen enough online, but I grabbed the remote anyway. A news anchor was mid-sentence, my name scrolling in bold beneath her. Sources close to the Moreau family say Solon has struggled with her place in the family for years. Some speculate that financial motivations could be behind her recent behavior. My chest tightened. "Financial motivations?" I whispered. "What are they doing?" "They're making sure you have nothing left," she said, voice urgent. "This isn't just about reputation, Senin. It's about isolation. They've already started freezing accounts linked to your name, citing irregularities to justify it. And your industry contacts? They're pulling away. You're being blacklisted." I swallowed hard, pressing a hand to my temple. "Magnus and Vess aren't just trying to ruin your name," she continued. "They're making sure you have nowhere to turn, and they won't stop here." A cold sense of dread settled in my gut. I had spent years trying to be indifferent to their cruelty, but this wasn't just cruelty anymore. This was war. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. For years, I had let them define me. I had let them make me small, insignificant. But they had underestimated me. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I wouldn't let them destroy me. I wouldn't just survive this. I would win. I reached for my phone and dialed Isolde. She answered on the first ring. "If they want to fight," I said, voice steady, "I'll give them one." I closed my laptop, my heart steady for the first time in years. It was time to show them exactly what a burden could do. I scrolled through the endless stream of articles, each one another carefully constructed lie. If they thought I would disappear, they were about to be very disappointed. The Moros had always been good at controlling narratives, at making sure the world only saw what they wanted it to see. But this time, they underestimated me. A sharp knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. My heart jumped before I reminded myself that I was safe, at least for now. I opened the door to find a small, unmarked envelope resting on my doormat. No return address. A chill ran down my spine. I picked it up cautiously, stepping back inside before peeling the flap open. My breath hitched the moment I saw the handwriting. My mother's. The ink had faded slightly, the paper worn at the edges, but there was no mistaking it. "If you're reading this, it means they never let me reach you. I tried, Senin, I tried." My hands shook as I read on. She wrote about the divorce, how Magnus had orchestrated everything to ensure she had nothing, how he had blocked every attempt she made to contact me, spinning the story so that I would believe she had simply walked away, how she had been afraid. The Moro name is built on lies, Senin. Money laundering, coercion, secrets buried beneath wealth and power. They don't let go of people like us. Be careful. My chest tightened as I reached the last lines. They won't let you go either. The words blurred as a wave of emotion crashed over me. Grief, fury, and something heavier. Something colder. I clenched the letter in my hands. I had spent years feeling abandoned, resenting her for leaving. But she hadn't left me. She had been erased. A buzzing sound snapped me out of my thoughts. My phone. I answered without checking the caller ID. "Senin," it was Isolde. "Are you okay?" I swallowed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I got a letter from my mother." A pause, then softly. "What did it say?" I stared down at the pages in my hands, the truth unraveling before me. It said I was never supposed to find out. Hours later, I sat at my desk, the letter beside me, my fingers drumming against the surface. I knew the Moros operated in shadows, but my mother's warning confirmed what I had always suspected. There were things happening beneath the surface that were far worse than the world knew, and I needed proof. I reached for my laptop, logging into a secure server I hadn't touched in years. I still had contacts, people who specialize in uncovering the things that powerful families worked so hard to hide. I typed in a name, Celine Moro. If Magnus and Vesper were planning their next move, Celine would be part of it, and I had a feeling her engagement wasn't the fairy tale she wanted people to believe. It didn't take long. A few messages, a few calls, and then the confirmation came through. Celine's fiancé was drowning in debt. The engagement was a business transaction, not a love story. A carefully crafted power move to secure Celine's position, orchestrated by Vesper herself. I clicked on Celine's latest social media post. True love built on trust and honesty. My lips curled into a humorless smirk. I copied the files I had been sent, saving them to my encrypted drive. Celine had always thrived on the illusion of perfection. Let's see how she handled the truth. The call from Isolde came just before midnight. "What are you planning to do?" she asked, her voice cautious. I exhaled slowly, my fingers brushing against the letter from my mother. "They took everything from me, Isolde." I murmured, "It's time I take something back." I placed the letter beside the incriminating documents, my resolve hardening. If my mother warned me to be careful, it only meant one thing. I was closer to the truth than they ever wanted me to be. I stared at the names on the documents. Powerful men, untouchable by law, all connected to Moro Industries, and I had proof. It should have felt like a victory, but I knew better, because the Moro Bros never just defended themselves. They attacked. The first sign came when I stepped into my office. The silence hit me before anything else. My assistant avoided my gaze. Conversations died when I passed. A few colleagues exchanged knowing glances before turning away entirely. I felt it in my gut. Something had shifted. I barely had time to set my bag down before my phone buzzed. Internal message. HR, me immediately. I exhaled slowly, grabbed my notepad, and made my way down the hall. Inside, the head of HR sat stiffly across the table, a folder open in front of her. There have been concerns about your integrity, Celine. I kept my expression neutral. Concerns from whom? She hesitated. That was enough of an answer. I assume this has nothing to do with my actual performance, I continued, leaning back, and everything to do with my last name. Her lips pressed into a thin line. We received allegations that confidential company data was leaked under your credentials. Given the nature of these accusations, we're putting you on immediate leave pending an internal review. A bitter laugh nearly escaped me. Lucian. This had his fingerprints all over it. You don't actually believe this, I said. The HR director didn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, Celine. That told me everything I needed to know. I stormed into Lucian's office without knocking. He was sitting behind his desk, scrolling through his phone, utterly unbothered. You're trying to erase me, I said, slamming the door shut behind me. Lucian finally looked up, one eyebrow raised. You erased yourself the moment you decided to turn against this family. I clenched my fists at my sides. So this is your strategy? Cutting me off wasn't enough? You want to ruin my career too? He leaned back, smirking. You don't have a career without us, Celine. You never did. I felt my jaw tighten. You think I need you? I asked, voice dangerously even. You think I won't survive with the Morrow name? Lucian sighed dramatically. Celine, let's be honest. You were always the weak link. The moment you stepped out of line, you became disposable. I took a slow, deliberate step forward. If you wanted me to walk away, I said, you should have left me with something to lose. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed Lucian's face. Uncertainty. And that was all I needed. That night, I met Isolde at a quiet corner cafe, the kind of place no one would think to look for me. She slid into the seat across from me, expression wary. What did they do? She asked. I handed her my suspension notice. She read it quickly, then exhaled through her nose. Lucian, I nodded. They think they've won, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. They don't realize I'm just getting started. Isolde studied me for a moment. What's your plan? I pulled out
my phone and typed a single message to a journalist contact I hadn't spoken to in years. Then I turned the screen toward her, a single file attachment, just enough to plant the first seed. Let's see how Lucian handles a taste of his own medicine, I murmured. The next morning, whispers began. Are the Morrow hiding something? Why is there a discrepancy in their charity funds? Luciano, next in line for his father's empire, but at what cost? By midday, the first article had dropped. Lucian was already calling, but I ignored it. I smirked as I closed my laptop. Let them think I was weak. It would make my move all the more devastating. Lucian had always been predictable, arrogant, reckless, and convinced of his own invincibility. That would be his downfall. But Magnus, he was a different beast entirely. When the formal invitation arrived, I wasn't surprised. A sleek envelope, thick cardstock, embossed lettering, Morrow Industries' signature brand of intimidation, disguised as sophistication. It was an invitation to meet with him. Magnus Morrow didn't summon people unless it benefited him, which meant he had a problem, and that problem was me. I arrived at headquarters exactly on time, no earlier, no later. If he wanted to play power games, I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of appearing eager. The assistant led me through the familiar hallways, my heels clicking against polished marble floors. Magnus was waiting in his office, seated behind an expansive desk, fingers steepled together in that calculated way of his. He gestured toward the chair across from him. Sit. I didn't move. I prefer to stand. His mouth barely twitched. Suit yourself then. Without preamble, he slid a document across the desk. This is my last act of generosity toward you, he said smoothly. I glanced down. A non-disclosure agreement. A financial settlement. Enough money to disappear and start over. Silence had a price, and he had just named it. You think you can buy me? I asked, keeping my voice even. Magnus leaned back in his chair, unbothered. I think you can be reasonable. Take the money sent in. Move on. I picked up the papers, skimming them. The sum was generous, life-changing for most people. But I wasn't most people. You're either with this family, Magnus said, or you're against it. I set the documents down carefully. Then I guess we both know where I stand. For the first time, his mask cracked, just for a fraction of a second. He had expected me to fold, to cut my losses and walk away. He still didn't understand. I wasn't playing their game anymore.
I was rewriting the rules. I turned and walked out, leaving the papers untouched on his desk. That night, something felt wrong. The moment I reached my apartment door, the lock was intact, no signs of forced entry, but as I stepped inside, the air felt different. Then I noticed it. My belongings had been moved, not stolen, shifted. A glass was slightly out of place on the counter. My desk chair had been adjusted. A book I had left on the coffee table was turned the wrong way. Someone had been here. My stomach twisted. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Silence. Then a voice, low, unfamiliar. Stop digging, Miss Morrow, or you'll end up just like her. The line went dead. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just about Magnus anymore.
I met Isolde in secret, my pulse still pounding from the call. She looked at me, her expression grim. Senan, if they feel threatened enough to do this, you need to leave. I exhaled slowly, gripping the edges of the incriminating documents. Leaving wasn't an option. Not anymore. I locked eyes with Isolde. No, I said. I'm going to finish this. The game had changed. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival. I had spent years allowing my family to dictate the narrative, to paint me as the burden, the disappointment, the problem. But today, I was rewriting the story. I walked into the Moreau Industries investor meeting, uninvited, my heels clicking against the marble floor, my presence drawing immediate attention. Eyes turned toward me, some in shock, others in curiosity. At the head of the room, Magnus sat in his usual seat of power, flanked by Vespera, Lucian, and Celine. His expression didn't change, but I saw the way his fingers curled slightly against the table. He had expected me to disappear. Instead, I had come to destroy him. I strode forward, my movements deliberate, and placed a stack of folders onto the long conference table. "Good morning," I said, my voice carrying through the room. "Before you proceed with today's agenda, I have something for you all." The silence was absolute. I turned to face the investors, some of the most powerful figures in the business world, watching as they reached for the files. Inside, they would find everything: proof of financial fraud, offshore accounts, falsified reports tied directly to Moreau Industries. "For years," I continued, "you've all believed in the illusion of Moreau Industries. Let me show you the truth." I pressed a button on the small remote in my hand. Behind me, a massive screen flickered to life. A series of documents appeared. Bank transfers, hidden transactions, numbers that didn't lie. The murmur started immediately. Whispers, hushed conversations. I saw brows furrow, hands tightening around the pages. Then Magnus stood abruptly. "Senan," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Enough." I met his gaze and held it. "You don't get to decide that anymore." The reaction was immediate. Lucian lunged from his chair, knocking several folders from the table. "You think this will change anything?" he hissed, his face contorted with rage. Celine, ever the social strategist, shrank away from the cameras that were already flashing. She knew her own scandal would surface next, her sham marriage, the financial deals behind it. There was no salvaging her public image now. Vespera didn't speak. She remained eerily still, watching me with sharp, calculating eyes. But for the first time, I saw something else in them, a flicker of uncertainty. She had spent her life controlling the Moreau narrative. She hadn't prepared for this. Magnus, however, remained calm. He exhaled slowly, his fingers tapping against the table in quiet rhythm, before he spoke again. "You've made a mistake." His voice sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement, a certainty. I swallowed, but I refused to let him see any hesitation. "No, Father," I said, my voice unwavering. "I finally did something right." The room exploded into chaos. Investors demanded answers. Reporters pushed forward, cameras flashing. The security team hesitated, unsure of who to listen to. Magnus had built his empire on control.
I had just set it on fire, and as I turned to the reporters, microphone in hand, I delivered the final blow. "Now tell me, who's the real burden in this family?" The dust hadn't settled yet, but I already knew things would never be the same again. The Moreau name had once been untouchable, a legacy of power, wealth, and control. Now it was a scandal, unraveling piece by piece across national headlines.
I watched from my apartment as the news played on the screen. The same anchors who once praised Magnus Moreau were now tearing him apart. Moreau Industries in freefall. CEO Magnus Moreau steps down amid financial fraud allegations. Lucien Moreau, blacklisted from major business circles. Investors distance themselves. Celine Moreau's wedding canceled after fiancé's financial scandal surfaces. Vasper Moreau, the mastermind behind the Moreau Charitable Foundation, has she cut a deal? I turned down the volume, leaning back against the couch. I should have felt victorious, but mostly I just felt free. A knock at my door broke the silence. I opened it to find Isolde holding a bottle of wine in one hand, 2 glasses in the other. She lifted an eyebrow. Celebratory drink. I stepped aside to let her in. More like a farewell toast. We settled into the couch, the city lights flickering beyond my window. Isolde poured the wine, watching me carefully. "So," she said, handing me a glass. "What now?" I exhaled slowly, letting the question sink in. For years, my life had been dictated by my last name, by the expectations, the power struggles, the endless fight to prove my worth. Now, for the first time, there was nothing standing in my way. A slow smile formed on my lips. "Now," I said, raising my glass, "I live my life." Later that night, I stood on my balcony, gazing at the city below. This time, I wasn't looking for an escape. I wasn't searching for validation or wondering where I fit in. I had walked away, and I had won. The Moreaus would spend years picking up the pieces of their ruined empire, but I wouldn't be around to watch. I had no interest in their downfall, because they didn't matter anymore. I stepped back inside, pausing just before closing the door. The name tag from that night, the one that had called me the family's burden, sat on my desk. For a moment, I considered throwing it away. Then I smiled. I left it there, untouched, a reminder. Because the truth was clear now. I was never the burden. They had always been mine. Before I step away from this story, I want to leave you with something to think about. For years, I believed that family was unbreakable, that no matter how deep the wounds, how cruel the betrayals, there was always a way back. But the truth is, not all families are meant to be held onto. Some are built on love and support. Others, they are built on control, obligation, and fear. Walking away wasn't easy. It took losing everything to realize that I was never the burden. They were. And if you've ever been in a place where you felt like you had to shrink yourself just to be accepted, let me tell you something. You don't owe anyone your silence. Not your parents, not your siblings, not the people who expect you to play a role that makes their life easier while making yours unbearable. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to step away, to choose yourself. But now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where walking away felt like the only way forward? Do you believe that family loyalty should be unconditional? Or do you think there's a point where enough is enough? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think or feel something real, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if you want more stories like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.